Everyone thinks a collapse is imminent. But with prices escalating every month, wages frozen for decades, and debt ballooning like a ball just waiting to burst, few realize that we may have been living in that collapse for a very long time. It didn't hit like a hurricane, like what we see in apocalyptic movies. It cracked silently, seeping through unpaid bills, cut-back meals, and endless nights of worry. The clearest signs are sometimes not found on economic charts, but appear on highways across the United States, where more and more people are choosing to live in old RVs. It wasn't a dream road trip, but because they could no longer afford a permanent home. When millions of workers are forced to turn their cars into homes, it shows not only that their wallets are shrinking, but also that the economic structure they rely on is losing stability. And what's even scarier isn't that they have to live in an RV, but that the rest of America might be heading in the same direction, just on a slower path. In today's video, we'll take a deeper look at the wave of workers displaced into RVs. What is the real reason behind this phenomenon? And what does that signal for the US economy in the near future? Let's find the answer right now. To know if America is still powerful, sometimes you don't need to look at GDP figures or the stock market. Just look at the migration map. The current alarming migration trend among Americans does not reflect the number of people immigrating to or emigrating from the country. It reflects the number of Americans who are leaving their actual homes to move into metal roofs on four wheels. This is a form of migration unprecedented in American history. Instead of seeking new lands, people are seeking ways to maintain a minimum standard of living right in the land of their birth. Approximately 40 million people are living in mobile homes, RVs, or other forms of temporary mobile housing. That number is enough to form a new state comparable in size to California. What's even more concerning is that the fastest growing group is those over 60, with approximately 3.2 million people. They are people who once believed they had passed through the most difficult part of their lives. But housing prices, the cost of living, and the demanding requirements of the rental market have pushed them out of their traditional homes. Even after moving into mobile homes, their financial pressure didn't decrease at all. A report by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau shows that people over 60 living in mobile homes still seem to bear a housing burden comparable to those living in fixed homes. In many western and southern states like Arizona, Nevada, Texas, and Florida, the number of people living permanently in RV parks has increased by 200 to 400% compared to before 2020. These are not free nomads or people following the minimalist lifestyle movement. This is a group of people who are ineligible to rent due to the strict requirements of landlords. Income must be 2.5 to 3 times the rent. In a country where wages don't keep pace with the rising cost of living, RVs become the last affordable roof. Not spacious, inconvenient for living, but cheap, and most importantly, doesn't require a credit score. The image of the RV has been associated with freedom, a bohemian lifestyle, or the forced adventures of old age. A cramped space, a refuge from unaffordable bills, and a fragile buffer between a roof over your head and homelessness. Many people describe moving into an RV as being caught between two chasms. On one side, rent prices far exceed income, and on the other, there's the risk of having to sleep outdoors. This phenomenon is no longer just a few isolated cases. Mobile cities are spreading across the United States. Walmart parking lots, empty lots beside highways, and old container yards are transforming into quiet residences every night. In some cities, overnight parking has become an informal housing system. Children study online from the backseats of cars. Adults cook on small electric stoves plugged into mini generators. And the elderly find fitful sleep amidst the sounds of trucks running all night. The rise of the nomadic lifestyle on wheels not only reflects changes in housing, it reflects a shift in the economic structure. The middle class is shrinking, the bottom class is expanding, and the housing market is no longer affordable for the vast majority of workers. Governments in many places still see this as a lifestyle choice, but its rapid growth shows the opposite. It is a direct consequence of the widening gap between housing prices and incomes. While RVs can help reduce costs to some extent, they also bring a multitude of uncertainties. The risk of being towed at night, lack of a fixed address, and difficulty accessing healthcare and social security. Living in a car doesn't make the burden disappear, it just shifts it from one form to another. If workers in a wealthy country like the US have to live in cars, what does the future hold? If a roof now has to be placed on four wheels, is stability becoming a luxury? And how many more people have to leave their homes before we dare call this by its true name, a nationwide housing crisis? Perhaps what set millions of people on the road wasn't the wheel. That's the ever-widening gap between house prices and wages. If you want to find the clearest evidence of the imbalance in the modern American economy, look at the housing market. From 2020 to 2024, the average home price increased by nearly 47% according to the Case-Shiller Index, the fastest increase since the 1970s. During the same period, the average hourly wage of workers increased by only about 15%. This number is not only smaller, but completely disproportionate. When housing costs increase 3 times faster than wage growth, the consequence is obvious. The working class is pushed out of their traditional living spaces. That pressure is no longer a vague feeling. In 22 states, the average rent now exceeds 35% of household income, a level that the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, directly calls a severe burden. For families living on hourly wages, spending over a third of their income on rent is almost equivalent to abandoning any opportunity for savings or financial reserves. Research reports that over 60% of renters in the US cannot save enough for the down payment needed to buy a home. What was once considered a milestone of stability and maturity, owning a home, has now become a distant goal. Not for lack of effort, but because the price structure has far exceeded their reach. For manual laborers, the demands of the rental market are even more stringent. In many major cities, landlords require an income 2.5 to 3 times the rent to qualify for a lease. A one-bedroom apartment in California now requires an annual income of approximately $78,000 to meet the standard of 30% of income for rent. That's a level that most workers, drivers, service staff, or night shift employees can't reach, even if they're working full-time. The result is a silent shift. Workers who previously lived in urban and suburban areas were pushed out to cheaper, more remote locations or fell directly into RV parks, where they could rent a spot for much less than the cost of traditional housing. At the societal level, this shift reveals a stark truth. Housing is no longer simply an essential living need, but has become an investment asset. And when housing becomes a speculative commodity, those who run the economy become the marginalized group. The irony is that the very labor force, the people who keep the economic wheels turning, is being excluded from the housing market by the very growth process it creates. Is a market where workers cannot afford to buy or rent still a market for humans? And if house prices continue to rise faster than wages, where will the system break down? No one has a definitive answer, but what's happening shows one thing clearly. When homes are no longer affordable for workers, they'll seek out the last place where prices are touchable. Tiashviyakshu, Park Shugwe, Chucks, scattered across the United States. There was a time when RV parks were where Americans went to relax. That used to be the image of summer road trips, of retired couples roaming long roads, of wide open freedom. But in just a decade, places that were once filled with laughter and the smell of barbecue have completely changed. According to the Campgrounds of America 2023-2024 report, over 70% of long-term renters at RV parks today are not tourists, but workers who cannot afford traditional housing. What was once a weekend getaway option is now becoming a long-term refuge for those trying to hold on in an economy beyond their reach. The cost to rent an RV slot ranges from $450 to $900 per month, significantly cheaper than the national average apartment rent of $890 per month. But that cheapness is only relative, because even RV parks are experiencing a price surge. Many areas have increased fees by 30 to 50% after being acquired by real estate investment trusts, following the same model of mobile home park takeovers that has occurred across the United States. When the last refugee is bought out and prices rise, those who depend on it are also caught in a vicious cycle. For low-income individuals, choosing an RV park isn't a matter of staying if they like, but rather having nowhere else to go. Because many localities prohibit long-term RV parking on private land, the poor are forced to live in commercial RV parks, where they have to pay to keep a small patch of land as their home. This not only limits choices, but also adds further cost pressure on those who are already struggling with every last penny at the end of the month. In the western and midwestern states, the sight of an old RV parked next to a weathered wooden fence, with an old washing machine hanging outside and sharing an outlet, has become a familiar image. Those everyday objects, placed side by side, tell a story without words. A wealthy country where an increasing number of people can no longer afford to own a proper home. The RV park is therefore no longer a stopover. It's an ecosystem of survival, where workers cut every small amount, weigh every loose dollar, and try to keep themselves from falling onto the streets. There, people don't live for freedom, but to avoid falling off the edge of an economy that no longer has a place for them in the traditional housing system. If the place once meant for vacations is now a refuge for the poor, how far have we strayed from the golden age? And what happens if these RV parks, the last resort, also start raising prices beyond reach? What's even more concerning is that it's not just the poor who are being pushed into this. The middle class is starting to emerge among the rows of old RVs, and that's the real sign that this crisis is deeper than we thought. For decades, the middle class was considered the stable backbone of America, the group with enough income to support a family, enough to save, and enough to withstand unexpected shocks. But right now, that stable shell is gradually cracking along lines that everyone can see but doesn't want to admit. According to CNBC in 2024, 44% of Americans with an annual income over $0,000 still live paycheck to paycheck. That number, if you look closely, is not just an economic figure. It's a warning that even the group once considered the safest is on the brink. The reason doesn't lie in a single event, but in the accumulation of the largest expenses in modern life. Soaring healthcare costs, expensive childcare, a sharp increase in car prices after the pandemic, and constantly rising local and property taxes. All of these factors have squeezed the resilience that was once a strength of the middle class. They're not poor, but they don't have any room for error. Just one accident, one surgery, or one job loss is enough for many families to lose their homes within 60 to 120 days if they don't have significant emergency savings. As rental prices continue to rise relentlessly, millions of households are forced to leave their apartments. Some people group together in shared housing to reduce costs. Others downsize their lives into an RV, not out of a desire for freedom, but because it's the only option that helps them avoid spiraling into debt. In this shift, many who owned homes for 20-30 years say they can't re-enter the housing market. Current prices far exceed the retirement income they rely on. The house, once a symbol of stability, has now become a luxury beyond reach. Part of the paradox lies in the supply. House price reductions are almost non-existent because the market is severely undersupplied. According to recent assessments, only 1 in 8 homes for sale is considered affordable for the median income group. When supply is insufficient, prices don't fall. When prices don't fall, the middle class loses its footing. So, if those once considered the most stable in society have to live in RVs, who else can claim to be middle class? And with the middle class faltering, will the American economy have any support to withstand the next shocks? That was the moment Americans began to feel a kind of undeclared recession, but everyone was living in it every day. On paper, the economy seems to be doing fine. But the Bureau of Economic Analysis says more than 26 states experienced negative or zero growth in the 2023-2024 period. When more than half of the economic map is in a state of contraction, the positive figures in the macroeconomic reports no longer have much meaning for real life. People experience the recession in completely different ways. They don't look at GDP charts or Federal Reserve reports. They look at the gas station bill, at the price of food increasing every week, at car insurance premiums rising 20–40%, while their salaries remain almost unchanged. They feel the recession through having to leave some items in their shopping carts, or when they have to choose between paying the electricity bill and buying medicine. Data from the BLS in 2024 shows that the number of people working more than one job is at its highest level since 1990. Not because they want to improve their income, but because they need to do so to survive. The consequences are widespread, affecting every corner of the economy. Over 50% of small businesses reported a decrease in revenue because people cut back on non-essential spending. Family-owned shops, small auto repair shops, and restaurants that are the soul of the local community are all under pressure. Many places have had to close quietly, leaving empty spaces behind like the stains of an unnamed recession. Not a few residents say they see the recession right outside their front door. It's just that the government hasn't named it yet. And it is precisely this mismatch between macroeconomic data and microeconomic realities that has created a growing sense of distrust. One of the most dangerous signals for consumption, investment, and confidence in the economy. When people don't believe that the numbers represent reality, they cut spending more aggressively, worry more, and the economy slows down from the bottom up. If recession is no longer measured by the GDP curve, but by the number of people sleeping in cars, then what stage is America in? And can the economy recover when most people have felt like they've been living in a recession for a very long time? When the economy contracts from the bottom up, the first group to be affected is always workers. And that's where the next story begins. In the industrial towns that dot the Midwest and Northeast, a heartbreaking image is becoming familiar. Factory parking lots devoid of buses, steel gates closed from early morning until late afternoon, and workshops that once shone with the lights of night shifts now lie silent, like a body without a heartbeat. From 2022 to 2024, the United States lost over 221,000 manufacturing jobs, according to BLS data. And the scariest thing isn't this number, but the speed at which it's spreading, like a crack running through communities that were once built on human labor. Factories are cutting shifts, reducing hours, or shifting production to Mexico and Southeast Asia to save costs. Each restructuring decision on the financial statements is a direct blow to the lives of thousands of families. Because a factory closing doesn't just mean job losses for workers, but also the loss of an entire chain of small shops, restaurants, gas stations, and sometimes even local schools that depend on tax revenue from the factory. Towns that were once filled with the sounds of train whistles and running engines now seem lifeless. When production weakens, the ripple effect happens almost immediately. Spending decreased, stores closed, services shrank, and the entire Midwest region fell into a near recession. For many towns, the only pillar supporting the local economy is the factory. And when it collapses, everything else falters along with it. If a country no longer protects its core workforce, what is left to cushion against a recession? And when job loss and homelessness happen simultaneously, what percentage of a family's chance is there to return to their old life? Even more frightening, All of this is happening against the backdrop of Americans carrying more debt than at any point in modern history. When there's no income left and nowhere else to turn, the story shifts from difficult to dangerous. And that's where the story enters its darkest chapter. If you want to understand why more and more Americans are living in RVs, look at the National Debt Report. Total credit card debt has surpassed $1.27 trillion, the highest level in modern history, according to 2024 data from the Federal Reserve. Meanwhile, the average credit card interest rate has reached 23.99%. With an interest rate of nearly 24%, even paying the minimum is like climbing a sand dune. The harder you try, the more the sand slides down and the slope never ends. The debt burden doesn't stop there. Student debt has surpassed $0.6 trillion, hindering the savings potential of an entire generation and delaying home ownership by 5 to 10 years. Meanwhile, 38% of American households don't even have $400 for emergencies, according to a 2024 Fed survey. It's not just a statistic, it's a reminder that nearly half of America is living on thin ice, where just a slight slip is enough to sink an entire family. When the cost of living increases faster than income, people turn to credit as a temporary lifeline to bridge the gap between their salary and basic needs. But that life raft didn't stay afloat for long. It turned into a door opening onto cycles of debt upon debt, making the financial foundation of each family more fragile than ever. A medical bill, a car repair, a month's rent increase, and that entire fragile stability could collapse. On a larger scale, a debt-based economy is inherently prone to collapse, especially when interest rates rise. And that's happening. Mortgage rates are now nearing 7%, double what they were in 2019. When interest rates rise, all loans become more expensive. Buying a house is harder, buying a car is harder, and refinancing is almost impossible. People are left with no choice but to downsize their lives, cut back on consumption, and hope they don't encounter any unexpected events. And that's why the stories of millions of people living in RVs are not just about housing. It's a story of debt. It's the story of a nation using future money to live in the present. And that future is becoming increasingly fragile. How long can a family living on future earnings survive before a crisis hits? And is the fact that millions of people are living in RVs a reminder that America is using debt to mask a deeper, more persistent, and more dangerous recession than is being claimed? If you're seeing similar changes around your neighborhood, please share your story. Because sometimes the truth isn't found in economic reports, but right in what we see every day. Looking back at this entire picture, from the elderly living in RVs, to the unemployed, to even the middle class being pushed out of the housing market, we encounter a difficult truth. Perhaps America isn't collapsing in a single major storm, but in quiet, small cracks that have been spreading for years. Overnight parking lots, RVs parked close together under streetlights, families struggling against debt with every penny. All of this paints a picture that the generation who lived through America's most prosperous times never imagined they would see. There has been no official announcement of a recession. No speech signaled a crisis. But the people feel it, not in GDP charts, but in their wallets each month, in the worried eyes of their neighbors, and in the very quiet changes around their neighborhoods. Perhaps the biggest question isn't about economics, but about hope. How much time do we have before small cracks become a major fissure? And if roofs now have to be placed on wheels, what shape will the future we leave for our children and grandchildren take? If what you hear today reflects in any way what you see around you, please share this story. A like, a comment, or a subscribe button not only helps spread information, it also lets those going through the same thing know they're not alone on this journey. What do you think? Is America in a period of transformation? Or is it sliding into a new era of instability? Please leave your thoughts below. I will read everything. The content in this video is based on publicly available data, reputable reports, and current social observations. The video is not intended to predict the future, does not promote panic, and does not assign blame to any individual, organization, or government. All analyses only reflect one perspective, aiming to help audiences better understand the ongoing socio-economic fluctuations. The figures presented may change over time, and viewers are encouraged to verify them from official sources. This video does not provide financial, investment, legal, or any form of professional advice. The individual decision belongs to the viewer, based on their own context and needs. The sole purpose of the video is to provoke reflection, open dialogue, and help us see more clearly the changes quietly taking place around us.